Welcome back to The Backmarkers, the F1 podcast for new fans by new fans. My name is Mike Hurley, and I am joined by my technical director, Austin Evans.
I'm just going to stick with the tech director role. I don't think I want any part of the strategy after watching that race.
Maybe you'd be better at it.
I don't think so. I might be okay at launching a car 15 feet down a road, but I don't think I could handle the shenanigans that happened today.
Jury's still out on whether you could start a car, though, right? Jury's still out. That's not been conclusively answered one way or another.
No, but I feel much more confident with that than trying to figure out the logistics of that race.
So we just got done with the 2022 French Grand Prix. Is it Paul Ricard?
Paul Ricard. Yeah. Maybe the last time we ever go and race on that track, because there's not a contract for that race to come back next year, and it seems very unlikely. Maybe it might kind of cycle, but I think there's a few things. The crowd size, as far as I know, is it's not as big of a venue. So I think they had 70,000 people, whereas a lot of the other venues are getting like 100,000 plus, 200,000. I know it was like in Austin and whatnot. And also, as we saw, the racing isn't exactly amazing. But before we get too far into
beautiful track, though.
Yeah, the red, white, and blue stripes do kind of make me
there's
proud to be an American.
So I sent Austin a video, the F1 Instagram account, like posted a reel, I guess it was also a TikTok, of like, why do these red and blue stripes exist? They didn't actually answer that question. They just answered what function they have. And the function they have is it slows cars down. Like I think it goes red and then blue, whatever. So I say it's the red stripes first. They slow cars down a bit, and then the blue ones slow them the whole way, if that's the way around it goes. That answers what they do. It doesn't answer why they did it. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the function they give, but it doesn't explain why they decided to do it in the first place. But anyway.
Look, it's a French track. They have the Big Monkey Trophy. They've got the stripes. Like, it's very unique. But before we get too far into the specifics, let's go ahead and just do a quick recap of the race. So, surprising no one, Max wins yet again for, I don't even know what time it is for this season. But the podium was a little different because it was a double Mercedes podium with Lewis coming P2 and George coming P3. Although, I think the P3 there was maybe a little controversial. Going down the rest of okay, well, we'll talk about it. The rest of the lineup, we had Checo coming in at P4, Carlos Sainz at P5, very sadly. Alonso coming in really solidly at P6, the McLaren with Norris at P7, Ocon for his home race P8, Ricciardo pulling in some decent points at P9, and Stroll barely making P10, almost running into Seb at the very last corner coming out. Man, look, there's a lot to talk about, and there's also little, because I feel like so much of this race was messy. It was messy on mistakes from the drivers. It was messy on strategy. It just, even the actual broadcast, like points where like the audio's cutting and people's mics, like it just, I don't know, I guess it was hot in France or something, but the whole thing just felt a little bit like a big bunch of shambles, I guess, to me.
Yeah, it was a messy race. It was kind of one of those races where it's like nothing's happening, and then a lot happens in a really condensed amount of time, then nothing happens again for a while. But like, this is again why I always say that for me there is no boring races, because like I always enjoy it, and like even that race, which I could imagine some people would call a boring race because it was by and large pretty sleepy. There was still these incredible moments of action, which we'll get to in a little bit more detail. But I wanted to come back to the idea of this being maybe the last time at Paul Ricard. Would that be the end of the French Grand Prix then, as far as we know? Like, is there another track that they could go to that would get them a larger audience? Or?
So they've only been racing at Paul Ricard for, I believe, 4 or 5 years. I think it was 2017, 2018 was the first race at Paul Ricard. Before they used to race at Magny-Cours, but that was, mostly in like the 80s and the 90s. And I think the last time they raced there was a while ago. I actually don't know the status of if that's a track that they can still go to, but there's a real emphasis from Formula One to go to tracks that are bigger, flashier.
Of course,
that's why there's so many street races. In fact, I know Max Verstappen in the interviews a couple days ago was kind of like, hey, can we not just only go to street races? Like, because there's a bunch of historical tracks that are in danger of falling off the calendar. Now, I don't think Paul Ricard is necessarily historical, but having a French Grand Prix certainly is. But Monaco is in danger, as well as Spa, which of course is one of, I think, the most iconic F1 tracks, in my opinion, right there below Monaco. all of them are in danger because so many of these tracks are older. The infrastructure, the way to get in, and the amount of seats that they can actually sell are so much lower. Whereas on the other side, you've got a Las Vegas or you've got a Saudi Arabia or whatever, which is going to bring in monster piles of money, super glitzy, glamorous. So as a business, Formula One is like, well, you know, these other tracks, maybe we'll just kind of cycle them in every other year or something. But specifically when it comes to this race at Paul Ricard, I would say it's pretty unlikely that we will be coming back here on a regular basis, and we might not come back at all.
And this is because it's like it is considered to be one of the sleepier tracks. Like at least Monaco does its Monaco's thing, you know. Like I would say Monaco is a more boring track than this one, but at least it's doing what it's doing. I mean, but ultimately though, I hope that they don't cut all of these kinds of tracks off the calendar because I feel like it starts to lose the heart of the sport a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a street race. I think that that's an interesting variety. But when those street races are coming at the expense of historical tracks, which again, I'm not putting Paul Ricard in that. But you think like if we lose Spa and Monaco, and even if they go into like, because a lot of people have been talking about maybe they will go like every other year for some of the other tracks and there'll be a little bit of a revolving thing. Fair enough, but I think specifically Paul Ricard has a lot of issues. And this is the first race, I think actually the big one that I was not really expecting. This feels like the first race all year where the cars had a real hard time following. Generally speaking, we've seen great racing, great action, but it's just so spread out. And obviously it was hot.
I think the heat, there was a problem today. They were saying it was like between 50 and 60 degrees Celsius on track. And so tires were really struggling today. So that could have been part of what we were seeing there.
Yeah, it was very much one of those races where everyone was kind of not sure on the strategy, not sure if it's going to be a one-stop, it's going to be a two-stop. There's a lot of kind of nursing the tires, but we did not see a lot of on-track overtaking. Mind you, still better, you know what we had seen in some previous years, but nowhere near the kind of level and quality of racing that we have seen, generally speaking, through 2022. But the other issues with Paul Ricard are it is a very safe track, as we saw. There's so much runoff. There's not a lot of danger. And also,
with tell that to Charles Leclerc, Austin.
Well, okay. Well, I don't know if I want to talk about that one.
One funny thing is, in F122 video game, which I'm still having just an absolute blast with, I've got my own team, Hurley Motorsport. We're tearing it up in the midfield right now. Paul Ricard is one of my favorite tracks to drive in the game because it is a very comfortable track to drive on. Lots of long straights, big corners. It's a nice. I actually find it. I did just win there. It's a race that I won. I just wanted to thank you so much. It was hard fought. I will say my teammate Oscar Piastri not doing a great job for me, Austin. I'm not going to lie. He's all the way down there at the end, and I'm battling out in the midfield. I've taken home 2 wins this season. I mean, come on.
Wow.
We're supposed to be down with Williams, and I've taken home 2 wins. What's Oscar doing? You know,
Hurley Motorsport just isn't what it used to be, man.
No, it's not. It really isn't. Let's talk about the biggest thing in this race. Right?
Do we have to? Can we maybe save that for later? Okay, fine.
Of course we have to.
It was rough. So just to set the context for maybe if you're just watching or you're listening for the highlights, Leclerc started on pole. Now, part of that was because in qualifying, Carlos actually had an engine penalty. I think he had to take a couple of new engine components, which there was a question of whether he was going to take a 10th place or a full grid penalty. And it ended up being, he was just going to start from the back of the grid. So he was mega fast, right? I think Carlos very comfortably was one of, if not the fastest cars all weekend. But when it came to qualifying, he was going to start at the back. So really, he was just there to help give Charles the tow. And he did. And Charles started P1.
Can I stop you there for a moment?
Please do.
Your thoughts on that? Just in general, your thoughts on that?
On the actual, the qualifying and just Carlos starting from the back and giving the tow and
the
everything.
Strategy, yeah.
I mean, it's fair enough. I mean, so the way it works is that Carlos was going to start from the back of the grid no matter what. But by him making it all the way through quali to Q3, because I think you actually do have to partake. You can't just not show up for quali.
Yeah, but he didn't have to put the work in that he put in. Like, he was putting in fastest times. Like, he was going hard.
His Q2 lap was incredible, right? And I think under normal circumstances, Carlos would have had pole, or at least had a very good shot at it. But it does make sense from a strategic standpoint because, you might as well make it to Q3. You might be bumping some of your rivals a little bit farther down the grid. And obviously, this is one of those tracks where a toe can be helpful. It wasn't huge, and to be fair, Charles may have had the pole anyway, because I think it was a few tenths margin. But I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it was very well executed if you watch the replays. I mean, Carlos timed it perfectly, got out of the way just at the right time. Like, it was very, very well choreographed. But it's one of those things where obviously it's always fun when all of the top teams are able to kind of dice for pole, and Carlos was clearly just there to kind of be a supporting act for Ferrari. But I don't have a problem with it. I think it's fair enough. If you're going to start from the back end way, you might as well try to help your team, help your teammate in whatever way you can.
My feelings are kind of complicated on it.
Really?
I don't fall one way or another. There is an element of it's like, okay, they at least used the best that they could of what they had, right? But I find I find it to be quite strange on a couple of levels. One, it's like, Carlos, your entire job this weekend is to work really, really hard to help Charles. But that's teamwork, right? So, like, I see that. But there's just this other part where, like, then compared to the other teams, there's just a part of it. It's like, this isn't actually Charles' pace in theory. Like, if they succeeded in what they were attempting to set out to do, and I agree with you that maybe Charles would have got that with or without the toe, but there is a thing of like, it's not actually his pace at the end of the day. So, does it not give him an unfair advantage over the rest of the team, of the other team? I'm not saying I don't think I come down on this one way or another.
Interesting.
I think I feel pretty conflicted about it. It's just like an odd thing to see happening on the track, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly downsides. I mean, obviously, you don't always have to have the penalty to try to give your teammate a toe, right? Like, sometimes you'll see, like, they'll go out for a couple of runs and one teammate will lead, the other teammate will lead to try to kind of help out. But
there's something about the lap after lap after lap part of it, right? Where, like,
sure,
it happens,
you're there just to help.
Exactly. You are purely, you are going as fast and as hard as you can just to get out of the way. And it's just like watching that happen like multiple times around. I was like, this is weird, but
it is weird.
But this is them doing the best that they could of what they had, right, for that weekend.
So Mike, will it make you feel better that all of that hard work was well rewarded, richly rewarded, and that Ferrari had an amazing race, and their tactics and their strategy were so on point that it just didn't matter in the end, right?
Let's take a pit stop, because we're not actually spoken about the main event. So let's take a pit stop.
Okay, I am going to prepare.
We're putting on a different set of tires to normal this time. We've not put this set of tires on the car before, all right? So it's going to be a completely different pit stop to what we've done before. You ready?
Ready?
Count me in.
Set, and go.
This episode of the Backmarkers is brought to you by Trade. When you become a Trade coffee customer, you'll get the freshest and best tasting coffee you've ever made at home. And the coffee you'll be drinking will be from the US's best independent craft roasters, which helps out small businesses a ton too. And this is super cool. Trade's coffee team taste test thousands of coffees to keep 450 different kinds live and ready to ship every day. Everyone has that one coffee that they love, and Trade's going to help you find it. Trade is so confident they're going to match you right the first time that if they don't, you just give them your feedback and one of their coffee experts will work with you directly to send a brand new bag for free so you know you're going to get looked after. Now, how do they match you? You take this really simple quiz. I took it myself. They ask you a bunch of very simple questions about the kinds of things you like, kind of like taste-wise. It's not a bunch of like coffee jargon. They make it really simple. And then they match you up with some stuff. They send it out. I absolutely love the coffee that I've got from Trade. And I also now just keep going back and buying some of my favorites, trying out some new stuff. It's amazing. And they can also just keep sending me new ones based on my preferences. Trade Coffee sends you freshly roasted beans from 60 of the country's best roasters, small businesses who pay farmers fair prices to sustainably source the greatest beans from around the world, and they've delivered over 5 million bags of fresh coffee with more than 750,000 positive reviews. Right now, Trade is offering new customers a total of $30 off your first order plus free shipping when you go to drinktrade.com/backmarkers. That is more than 40 cups of coffee for free. Get started by taking their quiz today at drinktrade.com/backmarkers and let Trade find a coffee that you'll love. One last time, that is drinktrade.com/backmarkers for $30 off. Our thanks to Trade for the support of the show and Relay FM.
And time.
Okay.
Mike, did you partake in some Trade right beforehand? Because I think you need to shave a couple seconds off there, my friend.
Okay, all right, go on, give it to me.
145.52. So
oof.
just a little off. Just a little off, my
That's
friend.
our slowest speed. Well, Trader coming back in a couple of episodes' time, so we'll see if I can shave a couple of seconds off.
You need to really kind of make sure you drink plenty of Trade beforehand. Although I will say it does show up very fast, and that quiz is really nice. But yeah, awesome.
I had a nose cone change there on that one. So
yeah. You got a little
I had to stop and go. I had to stop and
yep.
go. You know,
I
just like our
gotcha,
friend Carlos. All right, so as you said, what did it do for the race? I mean, honestly, it's rough, man. It's rough.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of things that happen in the race. So starting out, the actual first lap was pretty good. I mean, we saw some pretty good slicing and dicing. So immediately Lewis got by Checo, which made a pretty big difference, and sort of that kind of helped him to have a fairly straightforward race, P3 and then inevitably P2. Max was kind of there. He was trying to pressure Charles, but it clearly took a lot of life out of his tires. But then out of nowhere, Max comes in for a pit stop and Charles just loses it. Now, I will say, man, were there some politics on the live feed, because immediately they play the radio message. So Charles kind of basically, he was in the middle of the corner, lost it in a very sort of weird kind of manner. And then they played his radio message where not only you got a classic Charles scream,
He was so
but
upset.
also, I mean, fair enough.
Yeah.
But it was something about, like, he was saying his throttle was stuck, and there's a lot of confusion about whether it was the same issue from last race where his throttle pedal was literally sticking down, or it was because he couldn't get out of the wall. In hindsight, it does seem like it was just he couldn't get the car out, but it still was very unclear. And man, seeing the commentators and everyone trying to kind of double speak, like not trying to like talk trash about Ferrari, but also trying to be like, oh, well, maybe that's a weird thing. Also, just a side note, can they just stop bringing Nico Rosberg on? Having him from home.
He does nothing. Like, I don't get
Nothing.
it. Like, he occasionally has an interesting thing to say, but like he's right to the mark like this all of the time, right? Which is like one thing. And then also like just when they go to his actual video feed and he's just in this weird dark room with a picture behind it, it's very strange.
Yeah, there's a whole backstory about why he's not allowed on track due to maybe or maybe not being vaccinated or something. But regardless,
really, that would make sense, because it did seem all of a sudden he just wasn't allowed on the track anymore.
Nico. It's not a coincidence. The only
thing.
time he's been on a broadcast was when he was outside in Monaco. Otherwise, they've not let him in anywhere. So
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
that makes sense.
But regardless, it was weird. And then like there was like some issues in the cool down room where they were trying to talk. Like,
yeah, what was happening? That was weird, right? So basically, the kind of the way it went was the car he crashed. We're not sure why, right? Yeah. The drivers weren't sure. The commentators weren't sure why. They were kind of like, we can't work out what's happened here. Did he mess up? Then it seemed like from the radio message, Charles said it was something. You could hear him say the word throttle, but it was very hard because he was very upset. Then we hear audio of Charles saying it was his mistake, right? He's talking to Rachel Brooks. Yeah. He says it was his mistake. I was very sad hearing it. It just was a very upsetting thing. And then that feels like cut and dry. But then in the cool-down room, the Red Bull technical director said something about the throttle, the same as last week, audio cut off. What?
Yeah, that was the thing that
just
got me.
Seems weird, right?
So I think, the way I understand it, that I do think it was Charles's mistake, and that the Red Bull guy was just hearing the message he had heard from the radio. But it was almost like when the actual Formula One, like race director, like the actual broadcast director, heard that, pulled the audio out so that there wouldn't be a bunch of like Red Bull, like Ferrari slander or something, which felt like weird censorship. I mean, maybe it was.
But
just
that makes it seem worse when they do that, because
so
now we're
weird.
here sitting like. Because if he would have said that, I'd be like, oh, he said that, but maybe he hadn't heard what we'd said. But now that they're cutting the audio, I'm like,
So weird. So weird. I mean, look, there's a whole lot of stuff, but I think it just sort of exemplifies that this race was messy from every possible angle.
Yeah.
So Charles either bended, maybe he's covering for Ferrari or whatever. I don't know.
I mean, I would say it's a bit of all of it. Because you've also got Ferrari strategy in here, which comes in play many times in the race. Where you can question, why didn't he come in? Why didn't he come in to cover off Max? Like, did he have the tire strength at that point in the race? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, they were obviously offset. It's tough to say. I think Charles, if he had not made that mistake, was probably in pretty good shape. Because while Max looked good, he did not look incredible. He did not look like he could really, really take Charles on. Like, he had a pretty firm grip on that race.
Charles looked in control of the race.
He did until he spun out at a weird spot for a weird reason. I totally can believe it's a mistake. You know, you're leading the race. The car is obviously a little slippery the whole time. I mean, it's easy for us, sitting at home watching on TV to think, oh, look, that looks easy. But all it takes is for these guys when they're on knife's edge for an hour, hour and a half at a time, like a tiniest little mistake, right? So gust of wind, blah, 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 whatever. So that's one side of it. Charles obviously crashed out, couldn't keep going. But at that point, then the race kind of got a little spicy because everyone's trying to dive in for pit stops. Max had just pitted barely. In fact, I think Max was actually pretty lucky. He barely was able to retain the lead. I think it was close. I think Lewis could have actually taken the lead of that race because the pit at Paul Ricard, another problem with the track, is so slow. Like if you take a pit stop at normal racing distance, you're losing 30 plus seconds, which is just incredibly slow. But then Carlos got a little, shall we say, unlucky with the timing of his pit stop. I mean, I don't know if you want to walk through it, but it's just like it was a absolute madhouse in the pit lane the second that everyone tried to steam in there. I know Mercedes double stacked, but Ferrari, man, that was rough to watch.
Yeah, they messed up. I mean, whatever it was, I'm not sure whether it was anything slow happening in the pit or they were slow trying to get the window for when the lights go green. But whatever it was, they messed up big time because Sainz nearly took out a Williams and half of the McLaren mechanics. Yeah. It was really bad because he actually hit the Williams. I think it was Albon, but his back wheel hit Albon's nose. Now it's so incredibly dangerous in that space to be messing around like that, which is why they immediately whacked a 5-second penalty on him.
Well deserved, if not more.
Because that was just, again, whose fault is it? I mean, it's probably a bit of everybody's, but that's not a place to be messing around in.
I mean, busy pit lanes are always a dangerous space, but you could see that sort of Carlos got in, and his pit stop didn't seem horrible, but by the time he was in, there was enough traffic. They kind of held him for a second, and like, just go. And it was literally about the worst possible time for him to go, which is just a major fail on either whoever was watching, whoever pressed the button, but it was a major fail on the team. Obviously, you as a driver are just doing whatever. They hit the light, you pull out, you do whatever you can. Like you can't, I mean, you're all the way down in the cockpit. You can't see anything. So you as a driver have to trust your team to tell you when it's safe to pull out. And obviously it was nowhere near
But do you not
the
check
right
the
time.
mirror?
No, the mirrors are like this small.
It wouldn't help you?
I don't think so. Plus, there's all kinds of crew all around your car anyway. I don't think as you as a driver have any sense whatsoever about what it looks like around the pit lane. You've got to trust the team. Press the button, turn the light on, drop the jack. You just got to go. And then once you pull out, then you can see, but you're already committed at that point. So I think it's very much down to the team. And then we've got Carlos, who is offset. I think he was on mediums when most everyone else was on hards. He's carrying a 5-second time penalty. And then there's absolute nonsense at the end of the race. There's one point in which Carlos, and mind you, again, we're watching the live feed, so it's hard to know exactly how much he's delayed.
In the way he's talking, you can hear what was going on, right? Yeah.
Like, he's literally there, like, at one point, Carlos is like, they're trying to, like, argue about whether or not they should pit, and there's only a few laps left, it's like 30 seconds time lost, and it's almost everyone's like, oh, just stay out. And then they're, like, telling him to pit as he's, like, passing Checo, and he's like, no, not now. It's just like, you imagine the concentration of him just in this incredibly intense scrap. And Ferrari's like, can you come on into the pits, my friend? It's like, what?
Yeah.
But then even after he gets by and everything's fine, they pull him in anyway with like 10 laps to go. Now, I will say, while it did look horrible in the moment, and maybe he lost a place, Ferrari, I do think were probably right in doing that, even though it seemed like an absolute insane thing, because he was on the mediums.
He wouldn't have lost it. I don't think he would have lost it.
Well, I don't know if he would have lost it. I don't know if that tire would have held together, right? Because that is way beyond what that tire was designed to do.
I think I said that weird. I don't think that the tire would have lasted the whole race. That medium was not going to go all the way.
It looked rough. And mind you, like, while his pace was decent, I don't think the problem was he was going to like fall off the cliff. I think the problem was the tire was going to explode and tear his car apart and maybe crash. Which it's one of those things where in hindsight, playing safe than sorry, and he was still able to salvage a reasonable sort of position. But imagine how bad that would have looked if Carlos would have crashed out or his tire would have exploded or whatever. Pirelli would have been mad. Ferrari would have looked like idiots. And it's hot, right? That tire was not doing well. So I think while it seemed crazy, I think the commentators were like, what are they doing? What are they doing? But in hindsight, I do think that was probably, if not the right decision, at least a defensible one.
So I think, well, ultimately, we can look again and say that Ferrari's overall team strategy is something that is holding them back quite significantly right now.
Well, because what they could have done, if they were really committed to pitting him, they could have pit him 5 laps earlier or something. And maybe, even though at that point there was probably enough of a gap, it wouldn't have made a difference. It just felt there was like so much indecisiveness. And Carlos is out there driving super hard on medium tires that should be completely falling apart, passing Checo on hards. It just felt messy. It just felt so messy. And it wasn't, while it's easy to bag on Ferrari, it's easy to really focus on Carlos, who should, in a lot of ways, have had a better race, or at least could have had a much better race. But then you've got yourself up there, your boy George. I don't know what he was thinking on some of those moves.
Hey, look, George knows his own set. He knows all the rules, man. I don't know. I don't know what was going on.
He's in the cockpit flipping through. Like, Article 4A actually says that I was far enough ahead.
The thing is,
whatever.
This is one of those things that I don't feel like I understand it enough. He seemed very set on this new rule. I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying George was like, but ultimately what I loved is Toto having to come on the radio and be like, buddy, you got to calm down now and just get the race done. Now, I mean, it would appear that this is just one of those things where they both thought they were right. They both blame each other. It didn't seem like it was being investigated, at least not by the time that the race was over. It was just one of those things where, like, everyone was mad, and I've never heard George that angry. Well, I'm not saying he was right, but I'm saying George really believed he was right. And it felt like, in a way, which is, normally you hear like, oh, he pushed me off the track. Everyone says that. But no, he was like, wouldn't let it go. Like 2 laps later, and he's still like, no, I should have this. And I just love that they were like, they just got to get Toto in and be like, George, you just got to calm down. Because the thing was, he was going to make it stick. He was going to get him. It was just a matter of when. But if he kept racing angry like that, he was going to lose the car.
Yeah, and it's just a bad look, right? Because, as much as you're a driver who's out there to drive the car as best as you can, you also have to keep in mind that you need to make the team look good and the sponsors look good and all this kind of stuff. Again, a big reason why I think Ferrari are constantly like, whenever there's a problem, they always have to like remind Charles, whatever, like, don't say anything bad about the team, right? Like, that's the kind of thing. And, that's why Toto's jumping on like, hey, shut up, drive, right? Like, just.
It's like, if there's a problem, we can deal with it later. But right now, just do the work. Because if it works out that you were wrong, well, now what? We're in 4th, right? Because if we look at the standings now, George is now 1 point behind Carlos Sainz for 4th in the driver's standings.
Unbelievable.
So, this is, you just lock the points away. Just lock the points away. Just forget it and keep pushing. And I can't believe I said that. I have this whole thing about everyone saying push all the time in Formula 1. It drives me mad.
Just keep pushing.
Well, it's like push. Like I wasn't. I wasn't. But what I mean is keep putting the work in, right? Because this is what I keep coming back to about my team here, is that they have reliability and they don't have cars exploding so far. They're not on their 4th power units in some of their cars. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
And that is what is making... I mean, at the moment, they are 34 points behind Ferrari in the Constructors, too.
That's wild.
So that gap is shrinking all the time.
Yeah. It's just... there's so much going on. Obviously, a tremendous result for Mercedes, especially because they thought that they were going to be incredible at this track. And through like quality and practice stuff, they looked bad, right? Like they were almost more off the pace than normal. But the race came to them, I think, both Lewis and George. I think more so Lewis. I think George was a little punchy, but fair enough.
Yep.
I think they both ran a pretty solid race.
Lewis had a great race.
And certainly the circumstances. Yeah. Lewis just did great, right? And, you heard him after the race talking about his drinks bottle wasn't working and laying down in the cool down room. I mean, you got to feel for these guys. just like losing kilos of just body weight in like an hour or whatever. But it was a good race, and I think certainly the best possible result for Mercedes. It looked like for maybe a split second that Lewis might be able to challenge Max, and maybe Max was going to fall off, but Max had it. I mean, once Charles was out of the equation, Max basically was on autopilot.
Outside of a problem, it was Max's race, which is why we didn't see anything of Max for a good 20 minutes.
Yeah, but it wasn't up the road doing this thing.
Again, we were talking about this on our last episode, saying it was only 10 seconds ahead. Like, it wasn't the 20, 30 seconds that we'd seen in previous. I'm not talking about like it being like, oh, Lewis was on him, but just the difference between these cars and the previous cars is like in previous years that would give you a 25, 30 second gap between first and second, that kind of thing, is what we were typically used to seeing, and now. I can't recall a time this season where we've seen something like that between first and second, which I just think is more interesting.
It's certainly more competitive. I will say I think Max was probably just driving to whatever pace he felt like.
Sure.
Because he didn't really, like, he could have gone faster if he needed to. He was just conserving his tires, making sure they made it to the end. But look, if we don't come back to this track, I'm okay with that. This was just, I
can't help it. I like it.
I think this was my least favorite race of the year. It just was messy. It was a lot. Like, there were no great. Like, what's the best moment of this race? Can you name one great moment in this race? Like,
well, okay. I mean, great moment. I don't have a great moment, but like the most interesting thing that happened was Charles coming off because it just opened up the race to a different possibility. I didn't want it to happen, but it happened.
I guess I can't call someone making a mistake and crashing out of the lead of a race a great moment. Like,
what do you remember from Monaco?
Nothing. Well, because Monaco's always a bad
Monaco's a snooze fest.
Yeah.
This is more exciting for me than Monaco.
Sure, but at least Monaco, there's the danger of the track and the history. And really, Monaco, you just go to watch qualifying, and the race is just kind of
those red and blue lines are dangerous, man. You know, you could
you
could rumble a little bit, you know, like shake something loose. Woof.
You might have to salute the American flag as you drive by. It's very dangerous.
Favorite backmarker of the race?
Oh, okay. Okay, so for me, and I'm going to give this just like, it's not backmarker, it's backmarker. Here, Pierre had a horrible qualifying for some reason. They've got an upgraded car this week, but he had a pretty solid race. It's obviously his home race. He did fine, but I give it to him almost as kind of like a default because, I mean, yeah, I could say maybe Alex did all right, but it just, again, not my favorite race, and there were not a lot of standout performances really anywhere, especially when it comes to the backmarkers.
I'm giving it to Zhou Guanyu because he pushed his car off the track. I just like it when you see drivers.
Oh, did he actually push that?
He was involved, you know. He was like getting in with the stewards, pushing the car off the track. You know, I just like seeing him get involved, you know. There really wasn't. There was no backmarkers of this race.
And also, it's a bad race.
Everyone between 15 and 10, there was kind of nothing going on until the two Aston Martins decided they wanted to murder each other on the final corner. Like, there wasn't really much going on there. But at the time, I was like, oh, look at him. He's pushing the car. You know, I kind of like it. It's like, he's just getting involved. Yeah. Getting stuck in, you know?
I mean, look, obviously it was early in the race. I do kind of feel for Yuki. Yuki had a really solid qualifying.
Rough. Yeah.
And, I mean, obviously that was not his fault, right? Like, sort of like Ocon. I mean, first lap, everyone's racing and stuff. I mean, he just got spun out and everything. But, yeah, how about underperformer of the race? Because you go ahead first. You go ahead first.
Sergio Perez.
Oh, actually, yes. Yeah,
Sergio should not have been in that position. The whole weekend he was off the pace. Even Red Bull was saying it. He wasn't on Max's pace. There didn't seem to be a reason. There was nothing wrong with the car that anyone was talking about. For whatever reason, Sergio was not on it this weekend. He should not have been put in a position where he was that far behind Lewis Hamilton. He should have been ahead of Lewis Hamilton. There's no reason why he shouldn't have been, and he couldn't. I don't think he got near Lewis for the entire race. And then he ended up losing out to George. When that car's straight line speed is just so much more aggressive than the Mercedes, George just got his elbows out and kept him off. Like, this was a bad race for Sergio.
I don't know. Like, I mean, obviously Checo was doing a tremendous job at the beginning of the race, right? He was doing so well. Or sorry, in the beginning of the season. But yeah, it's just lately, like, he's not been on the pace. You start seeing him kind of talking about how, like, Red Bull car development is kind of moving away from him and back toward Max. And it's just, it's weird. Like, obviously there's a lot of psychology that comes into, you know, what it takes to be sort of like, get that last, you know, 2-3%, which makes all the difference. But it's not looking good for Checo right now. Like, I don't know.
I don't know. I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I would say this wasn't his race, but he's been pretty decent in some previous races, and he's only 7 points behind Charles Leclerc.
He's certainly doing fine, but I don't think he's doing great. I'm just starting to see some cracks forming.
There was middle of the season, the middle of what we've seen so far, and it was like, oh my God, he might win it. Right, like we were asked having that question, and that isn't a question anymore. So I will give you that. Right, like it was like, well, it's going to be either Sergio or Max, and now it's only just going to be Max. Right, like I don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm gonna just say my underperformer though. While I think that is actually an excellent, correct answer, I'm just gonna give it to the team, the Scuderia Ferrari team, for just like it just felt like it was just so messy. Like I don't know. Obviously, Charles' thing, I don't think was Ferrari's fault. I don't think so. But that pit stop was horrendous, right? Like that was so bad. And their indecision just made them look like complete fools. And man, that's just like, you can't do that. If you're trying to challenge for a championship, you can't be making mistakes like Charles did. You can't be letting your drivers down like they did with Carlos. Like Red Bull, all they needed to do was just do okay in this race. And that's exactly what they did. Max just did his job. The team did their job. And they got maximum points. Ferrari were just tripping over themselves, left, right, and center, across the entire team, drivers and actual team. So, yeah.
What was your favorite thing of the race?
We don't have to come back anymore. I just don't. It was bad. It was bad. Like, I just... Obviously, maybe I'm a little bit grumpier when I wake up super early in the morning and fall asleep almost watching a race that was boring. But like, this reminded me of the old school races that these sort of new regulations were meant to sort of stamp out. And I just don't think the track was that great, but also it just was messy. I just keep saying the word messy because that's what the whole thing felt like. Did you have a personal favorite, Mike? Was there anything good in this race that you can salvage? Was there any glimmer of hope?
Do you need me to say it?
I think you need to say it.
Double podium for my boys, man. I mean, come on. Second and third. You know, the old 2-3 that everyone's looking for. Everyone wants the old 2-3. We got that this week.
That's pretty good points.
It's fantastic points. I mean, that's the best. That is the actual best possible result that could be looked for any race that Mercedes is in right now.
Yep.
An absolute bag of points. Great for both Lewis and George. Great to see George get on the podium after having a real tough outing last time. I'm very, 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 very happy with the way that race went for Mercedes, obviously. But I think it's a good result for them. And as I've said before, I think it is a real good testament for what that team is right now, which is they are not winning races, but they are finishing them. Like, that's what they do. And they're in it.
That's actually a great point. Like, really, if you kind of sum up Mercedes' season, slow but finishing is better than fast but horrible mistakes and explosions all the time, right? That's really
we
kind
are
of the story.
Looking right now. I mean, we're approaching halfway, right? And right, I think because we're about to take the summer break.
This may have actually been half.
I think it is.
We're
halfway,
pretty close to half, or maybe
break,
last race was half.
In my mind, the summer break is halfway, but it's not. Which I feel like it should be halfway if they're going to take a break, but they don't do it that way.
Don't quote me on this, but I think this was the beginning of the second half. I think this was last race was the halfway point, I believe.
Yeah, because this is race 12 and there's 23. So yeah.
Right.
But you know, as we are now halfway through the season, we are looking at the possibility of Mercedes overtaking Ferrari in the constructors.
That's so sad.
Right?
That's not okay.
And this is because Ferrari are struggling to get both cars past the finish line.
Yeah.
For whatever the reasons are. I mean, that has been something we have been talking about for the entire season. And, you know, it was mentioned, we don't know, but like another Ferrari power unit may have gone out today in the Alfa Romeo. Like, we're not sure what happened to Zhou Guanyu's car yet. I mean, he did have some contact, so maybe that was related to it, but... You know,
but his car was just stopped. Like it wasn't. He didn't. It just gave out on him for some reason or another.
It didn't explode, which is always good.
It didn't explode like our buddy Carlos found out last time. Speaking of Carlos, I don't know if we have to really have much of a discussion here. Driver of the day.
Easy.
Obviously.
Unbelievable. Mammoth effort he put in today.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just even today, it was the whole weekend. He was so fast. It sucks that he had to take the penalty here because I feel like really, especially seeing how the race went, Carlos would have easily won this. I really believe if he was
I think different tire strategy and he could have won it. Like if he would have been able to benefit from free pit stops at the right times or whatever, and even coming from the back, he could have won it today because he was just taking obscene chunks of time out of everyone. It was kind of incredible to watch today, really.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he had that fresh power unit, and if he didn't have to start from the very back, I think it would have been an easier thing. But the fact that he could have potentially won that race with just a little bit of luck and a little bit of I don't know what's competency, I think that might be the word from the team, is I think a real testament to him, who's again just like Checo had an up and down season, right? He's not always been sort of on the pace of Charles, but I think this was a weekend that really showed the Carlos kind of, this is the Carlos Sainz that I think Ferrari really were hoping would show up, and he certainly did absolutely his best this week. But man, that just what a weird race.
It was a weird race.
Such a weird race.
But it was weird, but it has some interesting parts to it. It has some talking points that we're going to keep coming back to, which is what is going on at Ferrari. And it's so wild. Like now we are halfway through, just to reflect on them for a little bit. When we started this season, they were going to win the Constructors and Charles was going to win the championship. Like that felt like an absolute no-brainer 3 races in. And now I don't know. I genuinely don't know, but we're halfway through, right? So much can still change. Yeah. But as it stands right now, it feels like they are not on top of their problems in the way that some other teams, like we didn't talk about them, but McLaren, vastly better week this week. They finally had their first upgrades to the car in quite a while. And I think that's improving their pace. You know, we're seeing that happen. And it feels like we spoke with Ferrari, got everything right initially. And it's kind of been downhill from there, which is a shame.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like you can see Ferrari had a couple of years of sort of being way off the pace. And even then, obviously, before that, it's been a while since they've really sort of challenged for the championship in a meaningful way. And it's like you can see the difference between, you know, teams like Red Bull, teams like Mercedes, who are battle-tested and really sharp in pretty much all aspects. Like, sure, some reliability issues on the Red Bull side, but you can see that these are teams that are working well and everything is, generally speaking, clicking together. And with Ferrari, it's like they've got glimpses of greatness, but they can't pull it together. You know, there's some dirt in the machinery. It's just not quite singing the way that it really should. And you can see that while in a lot of ways Ferrari have had one of, if not the fastest car of the season, but they have not been able to pull out the results that they should have. Whereas Mercedes have had, honestly, a really slow car, but terrific reliability, great teamwork, and drivers who are absolutely delivering day in and day out. And you look at the combination there, and it's like, it shows why Formula One is such a team sport. You have to have the drivers absolutely being on point. You also have to have the teams being on point, and you have to build the fast cars that are like reliable. And it's like if you don't have all of those things dead on, you just can't challenge. And it's clear that Ferrari, while they have a couple parts of that puzzle, they are not able to put it together. And we're seeing the results of that right now.
And we're going to see if they're going to be able to find those puzzle pieces next week as we go to the Hungaroring. I think I said that halfway correctly for the Hungarian Grand Prix. I love the name. I don't think I could spell it. No, I can't. I'm not even going to try. But I love it. It's a fun track. I'm excited about it, and we're going to see it next week. If you want to catch the show live, don't forget we stream as soon as we can after the end of each race. You can go to backmarkers.live, and you can find us there. But that's where you'll also find the YouTube videos. We do these every single time, so in case you want to watch, we do that for you. But we also have the audio at backmarkers.fm as well. We are at Backmarkers Live on Twitter. And we'll be back next week with the Hungarian Grand Prix. Until then, say goodbye, Austin Evans.
I would say goodbye, but unfortunately my mic is not working because the cool-down room is about to begin. That's only a gag that video listeners are going to get. Stupid. All right, I'm going to cut on my audio.
Yeah, I
Welcome
really
to
enjoyed
the cool-down room.
The quiet stupid there at the end. That's my favorite part. Stupid.
Oh, man. All right. I'm uploading the audio. Well, thanks everyone in the cool down room. We're gonna actually keep our mics on, unlike the real cool down room today. Yeah, there's like a lot to talk about, but also just I feel like I have not been that frustrated in a while watching a race.
I was just sleepy.
I don't know, I felt like it was just like shambles. That's not what I watch Formula One for, right? Like I expect to see the fastest drivers and the fastest teams and the fastest cars pulling out amazing performances and this and that, and just nothing. Like everything just was like, oh, amateur, oh, crash, oh, that's it. Just I don't know, it wasn't.
From Mike, who is Hungarian, Hungaroring, say like the long O sound.
Uh-oh, I don't know. I'm not qualified. I called this the American French Grand Prix too many times to be able to be qualified to say it like that. But thank you, Mike, for trying to coach us in ways that we're desperately in need of. I'll give you the fake ending of the podcast. So, Ricardo, if you're watching this video live, what you actually might not know is that this is kind of like a video / audio, like both are kind of equal priority. So a lot of people actually listen to this audio instead of watching the video. More.
Multiple times more.
So essentially, when we do that sort of fake end to the podcast, that's the end of the audio feed.
Yeah.
And then if you're still watching and listening right now, this is just us kind of hanging out, doing kind of like the after show. It's exclusive to you if you're here on YouTube watching the live feed. So that's why we do the fake ending of the podcast, is because for the vast majority of people who listen to the show, that's the end. They're not listening to this anymore.
So we just hang out while we get our files all ready and stuff.
Exactly. We got to upload stuff. We got to go and actually have a good time with the chat, since while we both kind of keep an eye on the chat, generally speaking, we're trying to stay focused on kind of like our notes and kind of going through the main bit of it.
We pulled the chat stuff in when there's like pieces of information that we need.
Exactly.
I think is more likely.
Yeah.
If it's people's opinions, which I do read as we're recording it, isn't it? I don't always bring them in.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris asked, would you recommend that sim chair from your last video for F1 racing? Chris, I did not. It's okay. I did a video trying some stuff from GameStop, and it was the I forget what it was called. It was like the cheapest sort of sim racing chair. It just doesn't feel great. Like, it's nice to have like a place to like mount your wheel and pedals, but it was annoying to build, and it just feels kind of cheapy. I have not found that. I was looking for that. I can't find your stupid Coke Vanilla.
Jackie was asking in the chat.
It looks good.
Coke
I found
vanilla,
vanilla.
0 sugar.
I found vanilla, but it wasn't zero. So I gotta find that.
It's my special Coke that nobody else can get. Seems like
it's the Mike exclusive. Is that the sponsor of Hurley Motorsport?
Yeah, I wish. I feel sorry for Jamie Chadwick still.
Look,
because she is dominating the W Series season, and it kind of just feels like. It's not great for anyone, really. It's not great for her, and it's not great for everybody else in the series.
Yeah. Like, look, I've not watched a ton of W Series, but it seems very clear to me that she is far too talented to be in a. I mean, it's technically a feeder series, kind of, but it's sort of its own thing, because typically, you kind of go through the normal ladder. She's just progressed
past it now. She has the experience.
Absolutely.
She's progressed past it. And I feel like it's not allowing for other women in the series to try and get to her level, because she's just, she should be progressing. There is a progression. She should be moving forward. And I can't work out, like, I know this show, like what people saying the biggest problem is funding. I'm aware of this, but I can't work out why that's a thing. Like, who doesn't want to sponsor who could be the first female full-time Formula One driver? Like, I don't get it. I feel like Nike should be like falling over themselves to get to, you know what I mean? It's very peculiar.
It is weird, and it kind of shows, I think, a big weakness of the W Series, because it's designed to help kind of drivers move up the ranks in a way that is not maybe being served by the regular sort of feeder ladder going through F3 and blah, blah, blah. But the fact that she doesn't have like an F2 seat at the least right now, I don't get it. Like, maybe, I don't know. I just can't wrap my head around it. So, something's not working there.
She's in the Williams program, right?
She is in the Williams. Is it? She's not a test driver. She's
in the driver program, like the young driver program.
Yeah, young driver program. Thank you. Yeah. Because I don't think she's an official test driver or anything. I could be wrong about that, but I believe she is. Yeah, attached to the team in some way. But yeah, she needs an F2 seat. Like, I don't get it.
Because I mean, I don't know if that's part of it too, right? Maybe there's been a path offered to her. Williams didn't want to take it. I don't know.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, so Mike in the chat saying that she was offered a Carlin F3 seat, but she turned it down. So, okay, look, if she's turned down opportunities, I have no idea. It just seems clear to me that she is massively outperforming everyone else and yet does not seem to have the upward mobility that typically you would see for a driver who is destroying everyone in a championship, right? Like, it's like, I don't know. I don't get it. She's in the Williams drivers program. There's no promotion chance. She's a development driver. Yeah, again, I don't know all of the details, but it just seems like clearly she is doing way too well to make the W Series exciting, right? Just because she's leaving everyone behind. And clearly that's not enough to get her into some higher formula. So it seems like it's a fail all the way around, which is unfortunate because W Series actually is fun to watch.
Yep.
She does F1 sim work for Albon. Okay, so I'm not surprised. I guess to be fair, I'm sure there's a lot of sort of development drivers.
I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff she does, but none of that is getting in a Formula One car, is it? Like, you know what I mean? Which is what she should be doing.
Tony saying she should have the super license points. Honestly, Tony, that is actually one great question. I have no idea what the super license points pay out for W Series, but hopefully, I have no idea. She could go up to Formula One without doing a full season of just practice sessions. Yeah, that's one of the things where when it comes to the junior formulas, I never have a great grasp of who has what super license points. Usually it's just one of those things where some commentators are like, oh, you need this or that or whatever. But that's actually not something that I'm all that familiar with. So I don't know. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I'd like to see her just advance and not dominate the series over and over and over again. But
it's just not good for her or anybody else.
It should say something, though, that we just watched a Formula One race and all we can talk about is a W Series because that was so much more interesting and so much more exciting.
It's just I saw the end of it when I tuned in for qualifying.
Yeah.
It's just like, of course, there she is again.
Yeah, surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
But no, they are doing, because I know that it's this year. You have to do young drivers. They have to, every team has to run in 2 FP1 sessions. A driver who has competed in less than 2 races or something? It's meant to be like, hey, bringing in drivers who aren't.
Nick DeVries just drove in place for Lewis this weekend, right? In
Correct,
FP1.
yes. And I think he also did did he do a Williams outing? I think this is the second time doing a practice session this year. I'm not 100% sure it was Williams, but I think so. But yeah, it would be nice to see a little bit more variety in the drivers they're pulling in. Obviously, every team has, their people, and I think every team, with maybe the exception of McLaren, has a pretty stacked sort of lineup of, young drivers who are coming through the ranks who they want to kind of give some kind of try. But yeah. Oh, actually, thank you, Michael. The Wikipedia page for the super license is very helpful. Yeah, that's a great point because honestly, it's not something that I think about all that much. Williams have Logan and Chadwick, but they're giving their outing to Nick, who works for Mercedes anyway. Yeah, but the thing is with
Mercedes
Williams
have such a whole level.
yeah. A lot of times I feel like Mercedes just tell Williams what's going on. They go, okay, Dad, no problem.
Because they do a lot for them.
Exactly. Like, please keep giving us engines. Thanks.
Engines and talent.
True. Very true. Yeah. Latifi's got to tear up the track somewhere where Jamie's got to race around W Series for 5 more years.
They gave him George for it that time. So
They did. So I'm sure they've got that.
All right. We're going to wrap up now. Thank you for hanging out, everyone. We'll be back next weekend. Have a great week ahead. And,
yes. For what I am sure is an incredibly exciting race. Actually, to be fair, I actually do like the Hungaroring. Actually, I think it's a pretty fun track. So
Hungaroring.
Okay, when I have to put more emphasis on it, it just sounds really bad. So
it doesn't sound great when you say it. I'm not sure why.
The Hungarian Grand Prix.
Perfect.
I got that one.
Bye, everybody.
Right.